Welcome to another episode of A Come Together. And we're live. Shrey, welcome back. And when I say welcome back, I don't mean to the podcast because unfortunately this is your first time. Although I'm so happy that you're the 100th episode because I wanted a really great guest for 100th episode, and you and I think was I in the podcast that you did a couple of years ago on the Don't Worry About It one?
I
Was I on
was, I
that one?
was. Yeah, I was. So
So we haven't done a
I'm
podcast together
honored to
since
be.
then.
Yeah, we haven't. It's this. I'm sad that it took me this long to be on your podcast, but now that I'm here, I'm hoping that this is worth it.
Oh, it's going to be awesome! I'm so excited. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, where you live, and we'll dive into things from there.
Awesome. All right. So I am Shrey. I live in India right now, but I used to I study and live in the United States, where that's where I met Effie, or Ephraim, as I like to call him.
That's right.
What I live in Bombay right now. That's where I'm originally from, and I did engineering at Rutgers, and then went on to work for consulting companies like Deloitte, and now I do consulting for like the pharmaceutical industry with Cipla in India. And
Oh, you
yeah,
do.
that's
So you started. You got back.
yeah.
So you're still in consulting.
I am for better or worse still in consulting.
Do you have to travel? Do you travel the same rate that you did in America?
No, it's again. I don't know if this is a net positive or negative, because I don't have a family like you yet, but I don't travel anymore. Like, it went from 100 to 0 real quick. I think companies wised up. They realized that we were not really needed after the pandemic era to be in person in a lot of these client offsite meetings, and that they could save a lot of money flying us down and feeding us expensive food. So, unfortunately, yeah, nobody pays for you to travel anymore.
It's so sad,
All
isn't it?
it is like, it feels like my wings have been clipped.
They have been because you were traveling everywhere, right? I mean,
It
the
was
way
like
that we met was Seattle, where you just
I
you
just
work it, you'd be consulting wherever, and you just hop on a plane and just get to
yeah.
wherever you're
Would
going that weekend.
there was a time people thought I worked as a steward or a pilot. They would be like,
No
"You're on a
way.
plane like twice a week. Like, surely you're working with United or JetBlue." But I was like, "Oh no,
You
that is
should
not
do
what I
that, by
do."
the way. I feel like that'd be fun. I've spoken to a couple. I have a couple of friends that have been that have worked on airlines, and
Uh
like even
huh.
if it was just for a year or two, they've absolutely loved it.
I have considered it. I have, but you know what? I think I have something called congenital tremors, which is like these tremors that happen in my hand, and I have no control over it. It's nothing
Really?
major, but I feel like, yeah. I got it from my dad and my granddad. But what that means is that I'd make a terrible steward. Imagine I am out to give you your kosher meal, or pour you a glass of wine, and I pour it all over you, or worse, over myself. That would,
Right.
yeah, that would, that I'd be like a hot spot for litigations and a lot of
Well, if it
medical
makes you feel
emergencies.
better, since the last time have you been to the States since 21?
No, I haven't. Like, it's it.
So traveling and customer service here has gone to shit. So I think that even if you
Uh,
did spill over anyone, you'd probably still be one of the better service people, I would imagine.
damn.
Yeah, it's a
That's
shame.
reassuring.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, um, wait, how long have you been working at this pharmaceutical company? When you do consulting, what do you do for them?
So contrary to what I used to do for Deloitte, which was more external clients, this is more internal. So I've been with their IT vertical, as what they call business partner, and I'm essentially responsible for streamlining and keeping the ball rolling on a lot of their projects within that department. So it could be anything from an integration with of a certain software. It could be managing databases. It could be automating certain tasks. These are certain projects that come up, and all internally, because we're always trying
Are you
to.
doing the building yourself, or are you just?
Oh, no. I get involved from more of like a project management standpoint. So or PMO as they call it, and I'm more responsible for liaising between the different parties and making sure that everyone's talking to everyone and we're getting things done
So it's
under
more
budget.
management
And
type.
yeah, more management type.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome. So cool. So I wanted to talk to you today because well, I want to talk to you about a lot of things. But one of the things I wanted to talk to you about is I was talking to my wife. We have to meet a couple of
Absolutely.
weeks ago. I'm so excited for you to come hang out again. We always have so much fun together. But I wanted to. But I was talking to her, and it actually started with I did an interview with a doctor this past week, and she, before she
Hmm.
went to med school, went to India for a year,
Right.
and she learned about meditation, she learned about Buddhism, she learned about yoga, she learned about dietary health and food health, and then when she said that when she went to med school, she kind of went with a little bit more of a broad picture than most people would, typically have.
Hmm.
While we're talking, I realized that I feel like America in our excited, youthful, perpetual state of chaos,
Hmm.
kind of doesn't pay so much attention to other older, richer, and more established cultures in parts of the world, including India.
Right.
And that's when I realized I knew nothing about your whole part of the world. So and then the war kicked off, and I don't know anything about
Right.
that. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about first of all, day to day, the differences between day to day life in India and America, and maybe a little bit about the political scenario and the war and
Hmm.
what's going on, the tensions, and if all that stuff sounds fun, some of the history about Buddhism a little
Right.
bit. Um, so where do you want to start? I feel like there's so many great topics to pick up from.
Let's start actually from what your friend was talking about, because I think that we can segue from there, because I think there's a lot of interesting points you brought up there with her saying that just being from India and being exposed to holistic medicine here, it if I got it correctly, it
Yeah,
informed a lot of her approach towards medicine once she got into med school in the States, right?
yeah. Well, one thing that we both concluded is that there's a difference between health and medicine. And someone
Right.
could be a healthy person and not receive medicine, and someone could receive medicine and not necessarily be a healthy person. And
Right.
so she said that she felt she learned more about health and life and longevity in India, and then the med school was more about the medicine aspect.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation, because that's something that I think about a lot these days, and maybe not so much from a cultural standpoint, but when there was the Olympics that happened recently. I don't know if it's as popular in the US as it is out here, but if there's something that you notice, is that a lot of the bodies that you see in front of you, whether it's in swimming or it's in weightlifting or table tennis, they're very differently shaped.
Yeah,
And well, we're talking of pro athletes here, people representing their country at the highest level. And it made me think that we have really brought down health to looking a certain way, to an aesthetic standard, when health is so much more than that. Because here I'm looking at people who are pro athletes, who are sportsmen, who I'm sure are incredibly healthy, but they don't fit that mold that we have kind of begun to associate with being healthy or being fit in the conventional sense. When you think about it now, it's like being ripped and muscular and a
like
certain
you.
body composition. I don't know about that, but
Oh,
but you know
oh,
what I'm
come on,
saying.
we all know it.
Uh, you know what I'm saying, right? Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's been distilled to an aesthetic standard, and where health is far more than that. And
Right. It's not
so I
just
think there.
superficial.
Right. It's not just superficial, and it's interesting to know that a lot of these people that look a certain way often die at 30 or 40 from a heart attack, because internally they're a mess. Whereas
Yeah.
the people with a little bit of a pot belly, and who look like they enjoy life at the same time, a lot of them go on to live to like 90 and 100. So
Yeah.
there is something to be said about how health is more than what we make of it.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Is that idea more heavily emphasized in India than it is in America? Because I know in America, it's obviously all about kind of the superficial looks, which is why I think like Ozempic has taken off, or those type of drugs has kind of taken off
Right.
because everyone could feel like they look phenomenal without having to put the
Hmm.
effort in. But I feel like everything in life kind of has a category of either being like the equivalent of junk food or the equivalent of healthy food, you know, and like
Yeah.
and you can get the junk food if you want, and like you could be full off that, but it's not
Right.
really what's good for you in the long term, you know. And I feel like
Absolutely.
you know
Yeah.
there's always short term things and long term things that you can do, and
Hmm.
um, and I feel like, you know, like generally speaking, you know, living a healthier lifestyle would be the equivalent of healthy food while just opting to look good with Ozempic or one of those shots or whatever would be a little bit equivalent of, at least unless you're trying to use it to balance out and kickstart your own healthy lifestyle. You know, a lot of people
I.
that are
Yeah.
overweight, you know, can't even start working out, and so they need to lose a couple of pounds before they even start exercising.
Right, right. No, absolutely. I think Ozempic is one of those things that um it depends on how you wield it, right? Like if there is something genetic about your body mass problems, like if you're diabetic, or if there's something that's, outside of the control of conventional things
Medicine.
that you can do to medicine. Yeah, like I think there is benefit to it, but now I think there's also this idea percolating in people's minds where it's a quick fix solution to being overweight. Like it's just you stab yourself every once a week, a month,
Something like that.
and
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah, and you lose the weight. But as research is coming out, um people say that there's a lot of side effects we still don't know about. And it comes back to this idea that there are no free lunches, right? You got to put in the work. You have to, do something to get something. And I think we will be seeing more of that as this um, miracle drug, as they call it. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Is
know,
is it as big in India
pen-
as it is in America?
not yet, not yet. So India is an interesting problem, and I think this comes down to like cultural, things. Um, it- we are a population that is predisposed to hypertension and diabetes because of successive famines that were orchestrated by the British Empire. That's something I learned very recently as well. So
Wait,
if
can
you
you
if you
explain
you
that to
know
me a little bit? Can you give me some more detail about that?
yeah, 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 absolutely. So if you notice that there tends to be a very skinny fat mold that a lot of South Asians tend to fall in. It's not exactly obese, but it's not exactly skinny. There's skinny
Yeah.
arms, but that weight you tend to put on more weight around your waist and hips and midriff. And I think a lot of research has been done into this. And while there are certain lifestyle factors to it, there's also
Hmm.
genetic component to it that goes back to the British induced famines. So when the British colonized India, um,
What year was
there
that?
it started sometime in the 1800s. And I think by the 1830s they had most of the Indian subcontinent under their control. And
Okay.
at that and it started as a company. It was the East India Company before it transitioned to the British Parliament. And whether it was the East India Company or the British Parliament, there was always um, a very extractionary approach to their rule in India, their colonial rule in India. So the food that was produced here, the raw materials produced here, the wealth produced here, the textiles produced here, a lot of that was just taken and sold in markets in the West and elsewhere. So that was kind of the nature of colonial rule. So these
That's
famines,
crazy.
yeah, yeah, it was an incredibly extractionary process. I mean, people today put the total loss to the Indian economy, if you had to compare it in relative terms, to billions of dollars. And we're still in a way recovering from it. When you think of India as the third world, or why is India like that, or why is Pakistan like that, it's essentially a lot of it is baggage from that era. But
Wow.
coming back to the famines and the genetic component of our physiology, these famines essentially caused us to adapt, because that's the nature of the human. It's the beauty and the curse of
Yeah.
biology, that we will adapt no matter what. So when
Hmm.
when you don't have a lot of food and you have to make do with little, the body started to naturally store more fat in certain places way
Wow.
to as a way to overcome that. So that is how this physiology started becoming a thing in the South Asian population. And that's why now when researchers talk about obesity in the South Asian context, it's not just about, oh, go and run on the treadmill more, or eat less. It's also looking at this genetic component that has developed over so many centuries, decades.
Wow. So
So
so is there how do you change that? Is it just a slow
it,
progress? Like it just takes a lot of time to undo it?
likely what it's taken it's a product of so many centuries. I mean, not so many, but like at least 2 centuries and a little more than that, because that's how approximately how long the British rule lasted. And
Right.
even into the first decades of India's independence, food was a commodity that was often at the risk of scarcity. And it's not always due to a lack of production or crop vitality. It's sometimes, distribution issues, supply chain issues, the lack of warehouses, etc. So I think until something called the Green Revolution, which happened in the 1960s in India, India was a food scarce country. It was after the Green Revolution that we became a food surplus breadbasket nation, and now we have enough food to send out to other countries that have scarcity. But yeah, the genetic imprint of those
Was that
years,
done through industrialization, or is that done just by the sheer number of people there and just working and farmers and stuff like
the
that?
the Green Revolution,
Yeah, the Green Revolution.
it was actually done through American help. So there was an American company and researchers that got together, and they created these hybrid high yield varieties of rice and wheat, which were
Wow.
then brought to India. So these high yield varieties were more resistant to pesticides, and they used more chemical fertilizers to improve output. And that is what really helped take India from being a food scarce nation to a food surplus nation.
I see. And what a lot of people talk about these days, especially with RFK and everything like that, is the whole
Mm-hmm.
"Make America Healthy" thing, and that we notice that all the stuff that we put in our food has been poisoning us for, ever. Did India
Right.
get that from with America's support? Was a lot of that kind of like, it does the I know, for example, I'm sorry, just to kind of clarify the point. When my wife and I
Yeah.
went on our honeymoon to Greece, we ate bread everywhere all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
we
Yeah.
felt great. We didn't feel bloated. We didn't feel disgusting. If I
Right.
eat a hamburger bun in America from the supermarket, I feel like a piece of crap. I feel I feel like it
Yeah.
sits in my stomach forever. Is India's food cleaner than, or is it also impacted by the American help in the revolution, in the Green Revolution?
So that's an interesting point that you bring up, because I think a lot of American travelers seem to echo that sentiment that when they go to Italy, they go to Florence, and they eat the pizza there. Suddenly, there's no gluten intolerance. Suddenly, like
Yeah,
they're
isn't
like
it
they're
crazy?
just. It is crazy, and I think people have kind of chalked it down to the way food is grown. So I do believe RFK. I mean, not agree with him on a lot of things, but I do think he has somewhat of a point here, that there is an overabundance of chemical fertilizers and genetically modified variants of crops that
Yeah,
we don't fully understand the effects of, that are I don't want to use the word, but yeah, poisoning the food system, the
sure.
food the food, and you're right, that has been a criticism of the Green Revolution in India as well. And there are instances of farmers in the areas where, so the Punjab, you've probably heard of that area. It's in northern India. it's
Okay.
it's it's a very agrarian part, which is where the Green Revolution was particularly centered. A lot of the farmers that worked on these fields, they started developing cancers, and a lot of genetic defects because of their exposure to artificial fertilizers and chemical pesticides. So
Wow.
if that's what the people growing the food for you are suffering from, there is something to be said about how it percolates into the food chain as well.
Yeah.
But I think in India there's also it I don't- it, there's tiers to it. There's, you can find organic raw stuff that is grown and devoid of a lot of these things. So as long as you can afford it, and I think this is
Is it
true of
is it
America.
expensive? Is it like prohibitively expensive, or it's
Mm,
reasonable?
it's relatively reasonable. It's relatively reasonable. Like I wouldn't say it's like if you had to go to Whole Foods,
Yeah.
I think that would work out to be a lot more expensive. Whereas in India, it's a little more mainstream.
Okay. Cool. Gotcha. Gotcha, gotcha, gotcha. So what if so tell me so you went so you spent you spent a big chunk of your life in America.
Right.
And amazing, you know, and from what I understand, it was you not only did you have a great time, but you also I'm going to say this for you. You were very successful in your in your endeavors, right? In terms of
Yeah,
community, in terms of friends, in terms of education and work. You certainly thrived in all aspects. I know that you know. I mean, think about all the times that we had together, and think about the mutual
absolutely.
friends we had, and everything we had, you know, and everything that you've gone through. What are some of the biggest cultural differences between the Americans and the Indians that you've observed while you're spending time in America,
Some of the biggest cultural differences. Okay.
or
Of
similarities, or both?
or similarities. So I think that we're both very, very capitalist in some ways. Like we're both very, all about we're very enterprising. We're very, let's find a solution to this.
Yeah,
There's definitely an aspect of that. It expresses it finds expression in slightly different ways, but I think we're both very enterprising people that way. What are some other similarities? I think um what are some let's talk about differences, like um
yeah. What about
I've
like
been to the
families or relationships and stuff like that? I know that in America, people kind of look at relationships like you're kind of supposed to wait off to have you know get married and have kids till like you're in your
right.
30s at this point. Is that the case in India?
Not really, but it depends on who you're asking. So, like for me, for instance, the kind of socioeconomic circles that I inhabit, we don't really care about it. Like, my parents never asked me about marriage. A
Really?
lot of most of my friends are unmarried. The ones that are married don't plan to have kids, or it's no longer it's not no longer the burning issue that it used to be previously. Of course, I will preface this by saying that we're a small minority of people that mostly belong to like the metropolitan cities, the quote unquote elite circles. So this is not something that you will see across the length and breadth of India. But yes, there is. If you go to the urban centers, if you go to cities in India, you'll see that kids here, the youth here, are not very dissimilar to American youth in that sense. Like, people are willing to put off marriage. There's a greater interest in self-actualization, in finding your path, and things that you would see resonate among American youth as well. So there's definitely a lot of overlaps there.
So I think so from what I observed in America, especially from you know my parents and grandparents era,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it I think a lot of today's you know desire for self actualization, as you put it,
Mm-hmm.
typically comes from a feeling of being like suppressed as an individual while they were growing up. You know, like there wasn't a lot of
Right.
emphasis on, hey, who are you? What's your passion? How do you want to live your life?
Mm-hmm.
It was more like, here's your responsibility. You're supposed to have a wife. You're supposed to have a
Correct.
kid. You're supposed to get a little house, and you're supposed to work hard. And then
Mm-hmm.
before you blink, you're 60. And then a lot of people rejected that notion and said, well,
Yeah.
what about my life? You know, I only got one of these.
Yeah.
So is that you know that's from what I see, that's the American kind of perspective.
Yeah.
Is that similar?
So again, yeah, I wouldn't say it is something that the vast majority of Indians would resonate with. I think there is a certain
But in the big cities and
communal.
stuff.
Yeah, it's more of like the upper crust of certain big cities, right? Like
Right.
Delhi and Bombay. Delhi is the capital city. Think of Bombay as a cross between LA and New York. It's like the entertainment and the financial capital of the country. So
Oh,
in
cool.
in yeah, so like in our cities, or Bangalore, which is like our Silicon Valley, there's a very significant minority of people who do subscribe to this American view of self actualization, and like you said, finding your path, and
But is that built
delaying marriage.
on like the pain? Is that built on the pain of being told that they don't have like almost a right to be themselves? Or is that just because, hey, let's just
No, I
copy
would say that
Americans?
it's
Or like, we want to
I'd
live
say
a
it's
better life?
it's all economic. So I might be quoting this completely wrong. Like if for you and your listeners, please feel free to like chat
Yeah.
GP this later. But there's a quote that goes something along the lines of, you know, people work as blue collar workers so that their children can work as white collar workers, so that their children can work as poets and artists. So you
Yes.
get what I'm. So it's like, you know, people. Oftentimes these choices are not really choices. They are kind of imposed on you because that's just the circumstances that you grew up in. You had to do certain things. You had to take on certain responsibilities because you had no other option. But tomorrow, like for instance, and we see this across the board as well, right? Like tomorrow, the sons of a very successful billionaire are not likely to also want to be to hustle as much because the fire in the belly is gone by then, right? Because
Yeah.
you have
Yeah.
grown up, you have grown up in comfort, you've grown up in luxury. And that's a good thing. That's the point
Yeah.
of human evolution. Like some people bemoan it. I know a, there are people that say, oh no, you gotta hustle as well, you gotta, you know, go through the same rites of passage. But I disagree. I'm saying that's the point, to for every successive generation to be more comfortable than the previous, and to have choices that I wasn't able to make, or my, and you know, fathers and forefathers weren't able to. So I
Right.
think that's where it comes from. That self-actualization is just a natural culmination of growing up in more comfort, in being afforded more choice.
Yeah, and more free. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's a very interesting point. I think it's interesting because I think that these days, the way that you kind of see people manifesting themselves or like starting their own businesses, they're not starting like a mom and pop supermarket, you know, like that they want to
Hmm.
start up one day and hand on to their kids. They want to be a podcaster. They want to be, you know,
Yeah.
a social media guy, or they want to be, they want to be an entertainer, an actor, or a singer, you know, and I think it's
Right.
good, by the way. I think it's really beautiful. I actually think that we probably need that kind of, the way you described, like the burning in your belly. I think that we need to have. I think that it's a combination. I think you have to balance in order to
Hmm.
really accomplish anything great. You need to have that fire in your belly. It just depends on which direction you want to
Right.
channel it. And then there's a
Yeah.
lot less urgency when you don't feel like your next meal is on the line, as opposed to like,
Correct.
oh, let me just do this podcast or not, you know. And okay, fine. So
Yeah.
this week I only have 2 episodes instead of 3, but my family's still eating, you know, like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it
Exactly.
becomes a lot easier to justify and rationalize, and you might not even necessarily have the same kind of work ethic because you have the comfort
Hmm.
of knowing that that not everything
You'll
is
be
on the line
fine.
for when you do
Yeah,
it.
you
Yeah,
have a roof over
exactly.
your head, right? And you know,
Right.
this is interesting because I noticed this even, you know, just to give you a personal example in my life. Like in the US, I was on an H-1B visa, and or you know, like an OPT visa, which is kind of like a temporary work visa students are able to sign up for. And I knew that I was, you know, I had bills to pay. I had to pay rent in Manhattan. I had to put food on the table. I needed to pay my, you know, Con Ed
You have to
electricity
party.
bills. So
You
and what? And at the
have to
parties, yeah,
party. Yeah.
absolutely. Like and you know, going out at night, like it was all a lot to think about. But and so that makes you more cautious about how you tread in the workplace. Like you're more likely to, you know, if your boss wants you to work till 1 a.m. all 5 days, you will do it because, you know,
Yeah.
you may grumble a little bit, but you'll do it, and you have more of an impetus to do those things. But now I realize in India, like I'm a little more outspoken, or you know, I'm more um, vocal about establishing and maintaining my boundaries. I would be like, okay, it is 7 p.m. This is not, you know, a burning issue. It's not something that needs resolution now. We can do this tomorrow. So
Good
these
for
are not
you.
things.
I love that.
Yeah, yeah, these are, but I also recognize that comes from a place of privilege, right? Like that I am over here, I know I have a roof over my head. I stay with my family. I you know, there's food. Like I know I can survive. So I'm able to make those boundaries. But I know, so I think it comes down to that again, like how much privilege you have to rock the boat, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. I don't think that it's inherently a bad thing. I think that the
Yeah.
next challenge that we're going to have as like as a species, as a world, as
Hmm.
humans, the next challenge we're going to have is that we're going to have so much abundance and and comfort and hopefully, I hope for everyone, right? That that the question really will become how how disciplined are the individuals now that they are comfortable to put their all into something else. And
Hmm.
that's going to be the next challenge. The next challenge is if you don't have to go to work tomorrow and you don't have to answer that email for work because it could be
Right.
responded to tomorrow, then what are you doing with today? Are you and I actually, and
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think that, and by the way, I'm not saying this because I'm anti this. I'm
Right.
really, but like, for example, you see more Americans smoking a lot more weed now than,
Yeah.
which I know that you are almost inherently, what do you call it? Like, you can, from what I remember, you weren't able to, like, you
I
can just
wasn't like,
consume
I
and not
think,
able to get, yeah, it just didn't work for
yeah,
you.
yeah. I had to. I remember going with Ari the next day because I was like, I need to feel this. So we went to a dispensary and got like their highest dose edible. And I remember for 45 minutes it still hadn't hit me. And I was like, you know what, maybe I'm just immune to this thing. And then
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But I
And
think
it
that the people that aren't immune to it are kind of just doing it as almost like a, well, I don't know what else to do now, so let me just do this. I think that
yeah,
a lot of people in America, as weed has become a lot more accessible and a lot more,
yeah,
it's legalized in more states. I think that we're actually kind of just like sedating ourselves by just saying, well, I did enough today and I'm comfortable, so let me just, sit at home
yeah,
and take an edible or smoke a J and then I'll be fine. But that doesn't typically translate into, that again, that burning belly in your stomach. Sometimes, for some people they could manage it, but
right.
I think that by and large, we have to figure out a way to kind of incentivize and motivate people to be their best, not because
Mm-hmm.
dinner's on the line, but because it's their own lives and you only have one of it, and like you should treat your own life
Right.
seriously because that's your life. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, Want to tell me a little bit about Buddhism?
Buddhism. So I don't know a whole lot about Buddhism. I will be very honest with you. I can speak to you more about Hinduism,
Oh yes,
because
please. I'm sorry. Wait. I don't know the difference between them. I'm so
no,
ignorant.
that's
No. I
a that's
apologize.
in some parts of India they're interchangeable, and this is an interesting way to talk about them as well, because in India, the way Indic religions are, the lines are blurred. Like if you go to Nepal, for instance, where one stops being Hindu, where someone starts being Buddhist is very blurry, because
Really?
yeah, yeah, like in a person in Nepal, and this is not just Nepal, it's in other parts of India as well, in parts of Sri Lanka too. You could be worshipping Hindu gods, but you can also worship Buddha. And you may have elements of Buddhism in your life, and you may mix and match them with elements of Hinduism. This is it's the South and even Southeast Asia, with Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia. It's very common for there to be a little mishmash of these two religions, because Buddhism sprung out of Hinduism. It was almost a reaction to early Vedic Hinduism, and it was kind of like a, a, a reformist creed at that time. And
Would it be fair to compare it to Christianity and Judaism, or is that a bad comparison?
mm, it could be
Okay,
it maybe,
that's
yeah,
a
like
very polite way of saying it.
no, 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 because I mean it really depends. There's no right or wrong answers here. There's it like it could be one way, because the Christianity did come out as an offshoot of Islam, sorry, of Judaism. I
Yeah,
misspoke. Or
yeah.
Judaism. So in that sense, yes, Buddhism did emerge as an offshoot of Hinduism, but yeah, for very different motivations. And but going back to our original point, it's how we talk about religion here can be very different from how you talk about it in the West, or in other parts of the world, where Abrahamic religions are more have more neater boundaries. And like a Jew is very different from a Christian, and you will do a lot of things very differently, and you're kind of cognizant of that. But in South and Southeast Asia, those lines can be very blurred, very blurred. It's interesting you talk
So
about
what's the
Buddhism
difference?
today.
So what's the foundation of Hinduism? What are the foundational ideas that you would have if you were to summarize to someone like myself who knows nothing?
Right.
And you would, yeah.
So the
How would you?
foundational
Yeah.
the main foundational text, or I can't even say text, of the Hindus, because it's an oral transmission, much like the Torah was
Yeah.
for centuries, is the Vedas. So the Vedas were like the Torah. They were these series of hymns that were divinely revealed, much like the Ark of the Covenant,
Hmm.
to sages in like 2000, 3000 BCE. And they transmitted it through an oral tradition for several thousand years before they were actually put down. And
Wow.
they form the corpus of Hinduism's spiritual core. So
Okay.
and then everything after that, it is like an interpretation of it. So they what every other strand of it has a different interpretation of the Vedas, and those are the different schools of thoughts that have emerged.
Cool. Gotcha. So there's a basic oral tradition. As time
Yeah,
goes on, there's different understandings as to what that
yeah,
tradition, how that
exactly.
manifests and how people understand it, and then different sects break off because is
Right.
Buddhism an offshoot or a sect of Hinduism like that in that sense?
So Buddhism, it rejected the Vedas. They had rejected the authority of the Vedas, and that's why it was
Ah,
so revolutionary, groundbreaking at that time, because they said we don't believe in this and we're our own thing. But a lot
I
of
see.
concepts, there are overlaps, like reincarnation, karma, um,
Yeah. So
the
what are those ideas? What's Hinduism's relationship with afterlife or recreation? What do we believe about the soul? What do we believe about
Mhm.
lives and afterlife or previous lives? What do we say?
Right. So reincarnate. So Hinduism always is a. Let me preface it by saying, a very optimistic religion. Even our
Okay.
villains, even the worst person that you can think of, Effie, will end up in a good place eventually. It's just that he will take more lives to get there. So
Hmm.
every birth that you take is a way for you to atone for the sins of your previous birth, and to go
Yeah.
closer to a state of. The Buddhists call it nothingness. The Hindus call it Satchitanand, which is pure bliss and of the consciousness. Now, these are very esoteric concepts that I don't think we'd want to get into, but it essentially means that you go to this undifferentiated state where there is no happiness or sadness. There just is. It's not like we dream of a heaven in the Christian or Islamic sense. We aspire to reach, to merge into the supreme consciousness that permeates us at all times, but we're not aware
Right.
of because of our earthly limitations.
That doesn't sound very far from Judaism at all. I mean, at least from my
Yeah.
understanding of Judaism, that we have these notions of what we call like takana, which is
Hmm.
to repair, like repairing previous mistakes and and repairing either our own if we were reincarnated or our parents' mistakes
Right.
and to kind of you know I get and there is that also same theme of like oneness, the
Yeah.
whole interconnectedness and the whole mass consciousness
Yeah.
that I have such a hard time believing that all these
You guys have
religions.
you guys have this concept called tikkun olam, right? Which is to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
the world a better place by the smallest of actions. So it's
to
it's in a
repair it.
way to repair it. Correct.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you for using the right word. So I remember reading about it, and I said that's very similar to how we Hindus, we may not frame it as repairing the world, but just being good and doing good into the world, so that you leave it in a better place than that which you received it. So
right.
there's there is that idea as well. Also, but I would say there's also a lot of orthopraxy in Hinduism, similar to Judaism. Like there's a lot of ritualism, um rites and things like that, which can get a little maddening and dizzying. But of course it's a very personal religion, or as we like to call it, a way of life. No,
Yeah,
you don't have to subscribe to all of these things. You don't have to do a lot of these things to be a Hindu. You just are. It's so, like, in Judaism you have a lot of mitzvot. It's mitzvahs that you
yeah,
have to
you got it, you
do.
got it. Yeah.
So, but in Hinduism, we don't have. It's not a hard and fast thing. You can do it. We call them sanskars. You call them mitzvahs. You want to do it. You can do it. You don't want to do it. That's fine. It's a lot more flexible.
Interesting. And there's no are there notions of like quote unquote repercussions or I hate the word punishment because I like to think of more consequences to actions. Like for example,
Hmm.
if someone doesn't invest in healthy relationships, then they're probably
Yeah,
going to end up just being lonely. And like I don't
yeah,
call that a punishment. I call that a consequence of years of a particular action or behavior or mindset.
right.
Is that emphasized?
To some degree, but there's like there is I think Indians tend to be a little more God fearing. Like, so I think there's a certain fatalism maybe that people do believe in, that that it's a weird contradiction, right? Like, there's this great belief in karma and personal agency, but there's also this idea that um there's predestination. So so in between that, you kind of live your life. Like, it, bec- because you may control everything in this life and in the here and now, but some things that happen to you were written because of what you did in a previous life. Now, you obviously
Right,
have no memory of that life. So
right,
it kind of accounts Hinduism kind of accounts for both things. Like, for the things that you can control, you obviously should be doing more and do your best. But for the things that you can't control, we say, well, that is because you might have done something bad in a previous life. And it's a way of making sense of what can't of the unknown. Every religion
right.
has a way of doing that, and I think in Hinduism we attribute it to the it's like a carried forward debt from a previous life.
So interesting, so cool. I think it's beautiful. I think that idea in general, because I think what it does is it gives you license to kind of take responsibility, and then if things
Right.
don't go the way that you kind of expect it, then you don't
Hmm.
say, "Oh, how come me?" You say, "Oh, well, this
Yeah.
must be the hand that I was dealt with based on the way that I behaved in a previous lifestyle, and so now it's my
Yeah.
job to kind of rectify it." So it's
Yeah.
I feel like that still is a lot of agency.
Yeah. That's actually a nice way. You've given it a new lease of life in my own head, because I
There
think
you
it
go.
does it does take away a certain victimization. Because I think that's something that and I see this a lot in the West, especially, where people that there's a little bit of an I, me, myself, why me, idea. But Hinduism tries to give you a more 30,000 foot level view of your life and say, well, it's not just you, and it might be due to something that happened in a different life, and it's okay, but yeah, now think about what you can do about it right now. So
Yeah,
I think, yeah, so I think that that does take away a little bit of that wallowing in self between that you can fall trap to.
awesome. It's so cool. What's are a lot of so in America, in the West these
Mm-hmm.
days, and I think we're actually coming a little bit, the pendulum is swinging the other way, but for
Yeah.
probably the last 15, 20 years minimum, it was
Yeah.
almost kind of like religion or God was kind of like almost like a bad word. You kind of didn't want to say it
Mm-hmm.
or admit it because you kind of almost seemed to disqualify yourself as someone that was less than practical, which is, in my
Yeah.
opinion, a little silly, but um what you can only do what you could do.
Yeah.
What's India? What's the general population's relationship with religion? Are a lot more people religious? Believers or religious, or a lot more people secular? What's it like there?
So I'll give you a take that is a little, harsh, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
In India, religion is a little bit of an opium of the masses. Because, see, we've suffered a lot under colonialism, and then right after independence, we're a democratic country, yes, and a very thriving, chaotic one. But the institutions that we see today, they have taken a long time to build, and they're not perfect. So when people have no way to, how do I frame this? They, when the institutions that are meant to serve you, and promise you the life that you deserve, fall short, when there's corruption, when there's a lot of um, red tape, and you're not able to rise up and move to the next level because of these systemic injustices, then you
Can you give
are
me an
forced
example of
to.
some of them? What are some
All
what are
right,
some kind of injustices that pop up?
let's say there's a village in a part of India, in the hinterlands, and the district collector, or the person in charge of um, taking care of it is thoroughly corrupt and embezzles funds. So you were promised electricity, or and Wi-Fi and clean drinking water next year, but because of the corruption in the system, because there's problems with people taking their cut, bribes, and delivering substandard work, you are not able to get 100% electricity or the water connection you were looking for by the end of next year. It may take 2 years, it may take 3 years, and even when it does come, it may come with its fair set of issues. It may not be as promised. So I think this is one example of it, a very contrived one, but
Sure. Yeah.
it happens at all levels. It happens in different capacities. Some states are better than others. It's not like India is. Think of India as a subcontinent. It's like the European Union. Every region has its own story. But I think it's some if we had to zoom out, we you can say with certainty that this is a problem that plagues a large cross section of it. And because
And
of this, yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
No, please, because of this. Yeah, finish it
I
up.
said because of this systemic, what I would call uh,
Corruption, or a
corruption. Yeah, this
bureaucracy,
this
maybe
rot.
even.
Yeah, this rot that exists. People have to repose their faith in something, right? Like, so who fills the void? It is religion. It is, and that is why you see so much religiosity. And in some senses, religiosity is proportionate to how destitute they are. Because the more you feel like you have no agency over bettering your life, the more you're going to trust an external force that
Wow,
might
such a
offer you
thoughtful
salvation.
perspective. Such a thoughtful perspective.
So
It's
when
so
you see
true.
like so when you see people being religious in India, it's not so much because you know they they want to do it. Like in some ways, it's a sad thing because they have no other way of making sense of this life. They
Yeah,
they think
a
that
lot of people feel that
you
way.
yeah, exactly. Some people, like in the US, might, uh, or not just the US. There's people doing it in other parts of the world. May turn to drugs to to numb the pain and whatnot. Some people turn to religion. So
Yeah.
and I am not a Marxist by any stretch of imagination, but in I will tell you that it does hold true to some extent in India, where it's a coping mechanism. It's a way of filling the void that the systemic injustices leave in India, because for so many people, it's the only way for them to account for whatever's happening to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I feel like that's always been the case with religion, right? That's what makes it so
Yeah,
so powerful, and that's what makes it so enduring, is that there's so many
yeah,
people that kind of depend on it to make sense of their lives.
right,
Which, by the way, I don't think is a bad thing necessarily, because I think that, I
yeah,
mean, my understanding with, when I say, when I say that I believe that Judaism is truth, right?
yeah,
I think that it's truth in the sense that it's a guidebook to live a successful and happy, meaningful life for almost
absolutely,
anyone that wants to kind of cling themselves to it. And, it sounds the same thing
yeah,
with Hinduism. It sounds, and I know it's the same
right,
thing with all other religions, that
right,
that it's almost like helps give us directions and helps keep us grounded to.
mm-hmm.
I almost look at religion almost like the evolution of consciousness. That
Yeah,
like we kind of go beyond our primal instincts for something greater, typically community, or typically long-term investments that we wouldn't
mm-hmm.
ordinarily think to make.
Right,
I guess evolutionarily or biologically, out of just
yeah,
desperate need to survive just the moment.
mm-hmm. Absolutely, I agree with that.
Interesting. So cool. How do politics work in India? What do you think of Modi? Is that his name? That's his name, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
That's
heard him on Lex Friedman's podcast. Did you listen to that?
I don't think I'll be very honest with you. I typically don't listen to podcasts. I have heard some of yours before.
Oh, thank
But
you.
yeah, but I typically don't listen to podcasts. And even if I do, this sounds horrible, but I read the transcript. I love reading the transcript. I'm more of a
Oh, that's
reader.
great.
Like
Yeah.
I like reading things rather than listening to things, even though it might be the same thing. But it
Sure.
just I feel like I process information faster that way. But
Okay.
no, I haven't heard the Friedman podcast. But yes, Modi is his name. That's the prime
Prime
minister that's
Minister.
been serving his third term right now. Unlike the United States, we do not have
Term
a
limit.
ban. Yeah, a term limit, so you can stand theoretically as many times as you want.
Is it 4-year terms?
It's five, so
5 year
worse.
terms. Cool. I
So
see.
this is his 11th ish going into 12th year into power.
And what do people in India think of him? What are his what's his is I don't even know. I like does American left and right politics translate to India left and right politics or not quite?
That's a very good question. So it, it doesn't. It really doesn't, because now let's say Modi is the leader of what would be considered the right wing party in India, because he's um, touted to be Hindu nationalist and all of that. But
Okay,
now, when I tell you about our nationalist right wing parties, they support a lot of policies at the economic level which are very socialist. So, right wing in India is more to do with social conservatism to some degree, and not so much with fiscal conservatism, if that makes sense to you.
that does make sense.
Because
Sure. Yeah.
it's like, over here, a very right wing party like the one that Modi leads at the moment is notorious for welfareism, for competitive welfareism, as we call it, where people are given out doles of um, 1,200 rupees, 1,500 rupees if you belong to a certain minority, or if you're a woman that earns less than so much, which is unthinkable in a right wing party in, say, the UK or the US. But
Yeah. Sure.
the way the yeah the more so yeah to going back to your question, it doesn't neatly map onto the Indian political context.
What's India's general relationship to Modi? What do you think of him? If I can ask you. I mean, if you don't want
Let's
to answer, you don't have to. But like, I don't want
No,
you to
no,
be
no.
uncomfortable at any point.
Not at all. Not no. There's no question you can ask me that will faze me. But I'll briefly tell you. India definitely likes Modi. That's why he's enjoying his 12th year in power. Although that popularity has taken a hit over the years, but he's still holding on. I mean, it's not fallen precipitously. My own views of him are a lot more complicated. I generally have not had a very positive opinion of him, because I don't agree with his politics. I don't agree with, and when you see, when you don't like someone in their first and second year of power, it's mostly theoretical, right? Because it's things they said they're going to do that inform your opinions. But now, into his third term, I can see what he's done. I can see the results of his actions. I can see the
Which are what?
consequences of a lot of them. Like, for instance, there was a time when he banned a certain currency note in the Indian system, and all of us had to line up to, turn them in before a deadline. And this was ostensibly done to curb corruption, and everyone knows that had absolutely no effect on it. So there have been a lot of short-sighted policies, or recently in Kashmir, which kind of has led to the war we're seeing right now. There have been things that, I think could have been done better, where he's kind of played to the galleries and does things just to win elections, and that are gimmicky but not thought through with a long-term perspective. So I think that is where my grouses with him typically lie.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. It sounds like he's just. I mean, I don't know how politics work, how politicians work, but it sounds like pretty typical, politics to me from an American point. Like this,
Yeah.
like our new head of the FBI, Kash Patel, saying, for the
Yeah.
last several, like last year or two, oh well, first day that I get in, I'm going to turn the whole FBI building, the whole Hoover, the whole FBI building into a museum of the deep state. Day one, and like it's a great talking point. It's very cute. It's a great cat. Like it got a lot of people to rally onto his side. But it's like,
Yeah.
in all sense of practicality, like what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Like how's that gonna happen?
Right, right. And maybe that's just the age we're living in, right? I feel like it's the age of social media and short attention spans. Like, and you have to do things, you sometimes have to say crazy things out there to get people's attention, even if it's not the best thing to say, even if it's not the best thing to do. So I think, a lot of these demagogues, these politicians that we see today, they promise things that grab eyeballs and, you know, attention, but are they in the best interest of the country, in the best interest
Or
of
how
the
realistic
polity?
are they even?
How realistic are they? God knows.
God does. We know too. By the way, God knows and we know. You know, the
God
answer
knows
is
I'm
not.
waiter. Yeah,
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 it's
yeah,
not. It's
yeah.
not. And the answer is not super high. Right? It's not super
It's
realistic.
it's true. It's
I
true.
guess.
Yeah.
I see. And so got it. So overall, he's been a leader for a long time. Modi's been a leader for a
Mm-hmm.
long time. Uh, Overall, generally speaking, obviously because people, this is a third term, people have obviously liked him to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Is there a lot of competition, or is the like are there a lot of other political figures that could be really a threat to him, or not really?
So it would dizzy you to see India's political landscape because we follow a British parliamentary style democracy. So unlike the two-party system that you have in presidential style that you have in America, we have maybe like 100 different parties. Of course, in
So do
parliament
you need
and in
coalitions and stuff like in Israel?
yeah, oh yeah, Israel's a great example. So it's the system is very similar to Israel, where you need to sometimes, if you don't get the numbers yourself, you need to reach out across the aisle and form alliances and whatnot. So we do have that, but in the first two terms, Modi had no need for alliances. They won thumping landslide majorities, and
Wow.
there was no need for coalitions. But as a sign of his, slightly declining popularity, and a bit of anti-incumbency. The third term was not as resounding a victory. He had to cobble up an alliance with a bunch of people, and so the current government is more of a coalition government, but um, not as much of an tenuous coalition as the one BB currently is in.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually talking. So I was talking to a friend of mine
Mhm.
recently because I was complaining about BB to him a little bit, and he was like,
Yeah,
"Listen," he goes, I certainly don't love BB myself." He's like,
yeah,
"But you," he goes, and he goes, "But we don't, as Americans, we don't think about the fact that if the Israeli government decided tomorrow, if one of the coalitions, one of the people that he'd agreed to come with, to partnership with, decided to leave." They
yeah,
could force elections tomorrow and everything could fall apart. And he goes, and the person that's going to
absolutely.
replace that's going to replace BB tomorrow is not going to be someone that's going to be more left leaning. They're going to be far more
Far more
right
right.
leaning and far more aggressive.
Yeah.
And he's like, so BB's kind of has is being forced to and I actually do hear that, and I think it's a point that's really not made often enough in
Yeah.
like in the global commentary on the war is
Hmm.
that that if he acts in one way that really pisses off one person one day the wrong way, the entire thing could
Yeah.
really fall apart,
Uh-huh.
and then
Yeah.
and so I think that should give people at least a little bit of pause in terms of their judgment. It certainly
Yeah.
gave me a little bit of pause, but on the other hand, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't still strive for better and for and for as good as you can make it. Like I
Yeah.
understand that's reality, but the whole what makes humanity great is that we dream and that we aspire
Hmm.
and push for greater, even though we don't think it's possible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is the beauty of coalition governments, where you can't steamroll, people with one idea. You have to go through a very consultative process to build consensus, to build um, this kind of consent for your policies. And I think that it is slow. It is frustrating at times, but I think it's in the best interest of a country as diverse as ours.
I hope so. I really do think so. Where is Pakistan relative to India? Again, excuse my absolute negligence, but
No
where is
worries. You
Pakistan
mean
and
like
what the heck is going
geography?
on right now?
So
Yeah,
Pakistan sits
geographically.
so Pakistan sits on the northwestern frontier of India. So India is bounded by Pakistan to its entire west, to China in the north, um, and um, and then to Myanmar or Burma to the east, southeast. And then we
Okay.
have Bangladesh, which is kind of we surround it, and Sri Lanka as an island to our southern waters. So that's roughly the geography of India. But yeah, Pakistan is it
It's to the
occupies the second.
northwest.
It's the northwest. Yeah.
How far is that from Bombay, from where you are?
From Bombay, like Karachi would probably be about 500 kilometers. Yeah, like that's like another coastal port city, that belongs to Pakistan, and they would probably be about 500 kilometers from me. So where Bombay is not incredibly far from Pakistan, but it's also not super close. Like what we call the border states, like Punjab and Gujarat and Kashmir. So those are the states that have a direct border with them.
Okay. And what's this tension? How long has this tension been going on for? Is this war out of the blue? Has it been coming? Has it been boiling, simmering for a long time? What's been going on with that? What's the
It's
story with this?
let's draw parallels. I always tell my Israeli and Jewish friends that India and Pakistan is a divorce that went through. Israel Palestine is a divorce that never happens, and here we have a divorce that actually went through. We had lines drawn, and we said, okay, this is yours, this is mine. It was so clinical that when the British left, they even divided the Indus Valley civilizations excavations between our two countries. So you imagine
Whoa.
a 4,000-year-old civilization, like that grew out of our Indus River. It was also divided. Like these porcelain pots, they go to India. This
Was that
statue, this
devastating?
rock,
When did that happen?
it was terrible. Partition is probably one of the bloodiest events in history. I think millions of people died, were displaced because the British. They essentially drew a line through what was then undivided India,
Hmm.
and the idea was at the heart of it was when the when India started developing a sort of national consciousness. Um, it There was a section of Muslims that felt like because they were not the majority in the subcontinent, they may be lauded over by the Hindus who were in the majority. So they wanted, there was a demand that they spearheaded for their own state, which was in its inception, it was supposed to be a secular state, but simply with a Muslim majority. So Pakistan was supposed to be the mirror image of India. India was a secular Hindu majority state, while Pakistan was supposed to be a secular Muslim majority state. The British, under Sir Ratcliffe, who had no experience whatsoever in any of these things and was seeing maps of India for the first time, he drew a line through areas of northwestern India where he felt like, okay, this is a more Muslim majority part, we put it there. This is a more Hindu majority part, let's put it on this side of the line. Sometimes he'd use rivers to mark boundaries, and he eventually came up with a bifurcation of our two countries. So that is where partition happened, and there was a mass influx of people because suddenly you found yourself on the wrong side of the border. You're like, oh, well, that's the Hindu majority country. I better head that side. Oh, that's the Muslim majority country. I better head that side. So people, caught, and the emotions were at an all-time high. People were rioting and killing, and um, suddenly, you have people coming from the other side of the border, displacing you and saying, "Hey, this is mine. You no longer belong here." So it was a mess. It was a colossal mess and a dark, dark chapter in our history.
This is the late 1800s.
This was no, this was 1947. Very, very
Whoa,
recent. So
really? The same
this,
time as
yeah,
Israel?
yep, same time. So
How come
the
no?
British fucked.
How come I don't know anything about this?
It's funny. The British fucked both of us over at the same time. So just
Yeah,
like how they
yeah.
drew
By the way,
the
the
map,
British screwed everything up, man. Seriously.
you see the maps of Israel and Palestine when they drew it for the mandate of Palestine when they were about to leave. It's just squiggly lines. Okay, this is going to be the West Bank. This is going to be Gaza. This is going to be the internationally administered territory of Jerusalem. It was similar. Like someone just came and drew lines, squiggly lines, and and then we were left to our devices. They left. They were like, it's not our problem anymore. Let them sort this out themselves. And just like you had the like the Nakba, as the Arabs call it, or the Israeli War of Independence, we had something similar here as well, where India and Pakistan, shortly after this mass population transfer, went to war over Kashmir, because Kashmir is the northernmost part of India, and it had an interesting history. So the population of Kashmir is predominantly Muslim, but it was ruled by a Hindu king. So, in addition to when the British left India, there were a lot of princely states, and the princely states were given complete autonomy to decide whether they wanted to join Pakistan or India. And the king of Kashmir, being a Hindu, acceded to India. He signed something called the Instrument of Accession and said, I want to be part of India. And it was ratified and done. The Pakistanis were like, no, but it's predominantly Muslim. It belongs with us. So that was the first war that broke out, and they sent some irregular Pashtun tribesmen into the capital of Kashmir. We airlifted our soldiers into the city. There was fighting, and we managed to hold on to most of it. They hold on to a little bit of it. So that is the first war, and what we are seeing right now is the most recent iteration of that same conflict.
Why did it start? Did has it always been? Has it always kind of been bubbling, almost like how West? I guess how Palestine and Israel has been, or is it like
In
has it been constantly just back and forth, but with relatively peaceful periods, or is it just kind of let's leave it alone for now, and then it kind of just blew up again randomly one day?
it's turbulent. It's like I wouldn't say it's exactly like Israel Palestine, but yeah, there are periods where that have been a little calm than others, but by and large, that area has been relatively turbulent. And I think the nature of the wars have changed, because initially it was purely a land dispute, but now what we are seeing today is also kind of a response to terrorism, because Pakistan has, as a matter of state policy, funded and provided resources to a lot of terror groups, not dissimilar to the way the Iranian Revolutionary Guard does.
Sure,
The Houthis and the Hezbollah and Hamas and all of them. These are all, if you trace the paper
the
trail, the
money.
currency, the
Yeah,
money, it all leads to offices in Qatar, in Tehran, and all of that. So similarly, Pakistan, as a matter of state policy, has funded and trained a lot of Islamist extremist groups to not just cause instability, destabilize India, but also other neighbors like Afghanistan. So in some ways, America is also involved in this, because back during the Cold War, when the U.S. wanted to push off the Soviets from Afghanistan, they
yeah,
pumped a lot of money into the Mujahideen, which was the local mullahs and whatever in Afghanistan, because they were the resistance against the Soviets. But
right.
then, after repulsing the Soviets, what did the Mujahideen do? And who were handling the Mujahideen there was the Pakistan deep state. So the Pakistani deep state simply took the Mujahideen from Afghanistan. They took those resources from there and they moved it to Kashmir, because now that the Soviets were gone, what do you do with this reactionary restive force? So
Right.
they've employed terrorist extremists like that to bleed India by 1,000 cuts, as we call it, and it's happened all across the length and breadth of this country. Bomb blasts, um, kidnappings, uh, mass executions. That's what we saw most recently in Kashmir.
Really? Where? When? How recently? I didn't hear.
This
Again,
was
I feel
on
so terrible. I don't know about any of this.
No, no, no. I mean, it's totally fair. This happened on the 22nd of April
Okay.
in Kashmir. So Kashmir is a very alpine, mountainous region. It's considered the Switzerland of India, and
Cool.
in the summer months, a lot of people from the mainland tend to go there to holiday. And
Okay.
especially, in the past few years, a lot of normalcy has returned to the state, and it's no longer been as on the
Turbulent.
boil, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, turbulent. So there's been an uptick in tourism, which is its biggest source of revenue. So there were a bunch of tourists that were gallivanting, having a nice day in these meadows in the mountains, when a bunch of terrorists swooped down and indiscriminately started firing at them. And they singled out all of the ones that were Hindu. They spared the women. They killed the men in front of them, and they literally put a gun to their heads and said, "Well, if are you Hindu or are you Muslim? If you're Muslim, recite these verses from the Quran so we know you're not lying. If not, boom, boom."
How
It
many people died?
about 28.
Oh man, really?
It was Yeah, it was a brutal massacre, and so unexpected. It was a bright sunny spring morning and afternoon at that point, and people were just enjoying themselves, having a good time. If you see pictures of it, there's picnic mats, there's people just taking selfies when they hear gunshots. It was that sudden and unexpected. So obviously, that led to a huge outrage, a lot of outrage in India, and people demanded accountability. And while there is a side to
So
it
is
where,
that what got
who,
these tensions kicked off? Was this
yes,
massive? That's what got this kicked off.
yes, that was the spark that lit
Are
the
these
fire.
terrorist groups calling? When I've been trying very hard. It's hard for me to do, but I really have been working very hard at it to try to kind of understand what the other side of
Uh-huh.
in the conflict has been saying. What's the other side's rationalization, justification, or what's their
Right.
story?
So Pakistan, at least what they tell themselves and what they try to sell in the world media is that these are local Kashmiris that are aspiring to independence and separatism, that they don't want to be part of India, that they're being forcibly held on, occupied and colonized by New
Gotcha.
Delhi,
Yeah,
and that their support for these extremists should be seen as a support
freedom
for
fighter.
freedom fighters. Yes, classic. But Kashmir is a settled issue. The people who there were Kashmiris who were caught in this carnage as well, and one of the big immediate responses was from local Kashmiris, because you have just killed their greatest source of revenue.
Yeah,
Normalcy had returned to their restive lands after so long. They
yeah,
were finally, welcoming tourists. There was businesses were running. The economy seemed like it was making a turn for the good. And then you send in these terrorists and obliterate all of that. So
yeah.
it's hard to reconcile that, right? But it is, it's just a matter of state policy now. Pakistan has always tried to prop up this um, fake resistance as a justification for its
Behavior,
acts here,
right? Yeah,
behavior, but it holds very little credibility and doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
yeah. Have you been to Israel before?
I actually went as part of the David project. It was through Hillel. It was funny. It was almost like a birthright trip because I didn't pay a
Yeah.
penny for it, and
So that's
I got.
awesome. How long do you go for? A week? 10 days?
Yeah, it was about 10 days.
And did you go to? I'm assuming you went to the old city in Jerusalem, right?
I did.
So did you walk through the Arab Shuk there?
Against the advice of my tour group, I did.
Right.
I
So
so yeah.
the reason why I'm asking you, the point I'm trying to get to. So I used to be afraid. My grandfather, my Saba, my mom's father, he died a couple of years ago, but he's an amazing man, and he loved Israel. And and I
Right.
used to be afraid to walk through the Arab Shuk, the Arab marketplace. And he's like, Ephraim, he goes, these guys just want a living. They just want to put food on the table. They just want, to feed their
Yeah,
families. They just want to live their lives and have their businesses. He's like, if anything happens to you, they lose their living for weeks or months at a time.
absolutely.
No one trusts them. He goes, so they're just so they want to they want to get along as well as
Yeah,
as much as anyone else does. And he goes, if you have a couple of extremists or young kids or whatever it is, he goes, unfortunately, you have to keep your eyes peeled. He goes, but by
right.
and large, everyone just kind of wants to live their lives and do their things. And it really made me feel a lot better about it. And not only did it make me feel
Yeah,
better about it, but I actually felt more inclined to stop in stores along the way and just say,
yeah,
kind of look and see what they have and, to make them feel like, hey, we're working together over here. And I understand that you're
yeah,
just trying to live and I'm just trying to live.
yeah.
But
It
that
humanizes
put it,
the conflict.
yes, we need to do that. So we really need to do that, and, of course, um, when things like mass murders or terrorist attacks happen, obviously there's no excuses.
Hmm.
But yeah, to humanize and to say, listen, like a lot of these people just want to live. They just want to
Absolutely.
so
And if you notice,
yeah,
Effie, it's always it's always people from outside that come and start most of these troubles. It's never
yes,
people with skin in the game, or people who it's all the radicalization always comes from these people trying to start proxy wars and instigate them. And we know in Israel Palestine's case, there's so many parties that are trying, that have their fingers in the pie. It's the
yeah.
same case even with Kashmir, where Pakistan's always trying to light this fuse, even though there is no appetite for it. It's a done and dusted. It's a settled issue, but they will not stop because there's also something to be said about how Pakistan is not a vibrant democracy like us. It's more of a military-run democracy because the army wields disproportionate power there. And these conflicts with India are the only thing that provide them legitimacy. They're
Right.
bloated, corrupt, rotten to the boot, and the only thing that allows them to keep up a certain image in the public eye is these manufactured conflicts with India. Is this
Yeah.
constant needling? Is
Yeah,
this
yeah, because
constant
it gives them so it almost
brinksmanship?
puts it gives them something to put on their resume. Hey, we did
Exactly.
this. We're trying to do this for this sake. And like
Right.
first of all, who asked? Number one, like
Exactly.
the people that are living there don't seem to ask if their living is based on tourism and now they can't get that.
Exactly, and the Pakistani army knows this all too well. They know that it's not just about putting it on a resume. It's also the only thing that will make them look good in the eyes of the public, right? These because
Uh,
they need a villain, and India and these manufactured conflicts, constant. The Pakistani people need to realize that the true villains are their own military, who
right.
cannot allow them to. The country is backward. It's funny, Effie, when we got partition. Pakistan had the higher GDP per capita.
Really?
Pakistan had, yeah, Pakistan got the more fertile lands. Pakistan got, we were generous in some ways in giving them that, and they were wealthier than us when we started off in 1947. By the time these in the last 10 years, we've left them far behind in the last few decades.
Yeah.
Their
Yeah.
priorities have been very different from ours. So this is what the Pakistani public doesn't realize, that the military is shortchanging them. It constantly props up this bogeyman of India and Kashmir to keep them embroiled in this
Yeah.
nonsensical
Yeah.
almost conflict, but it's not in their interest anymore.
Yeah, the way I think, and this actually almost goes full circle to the beginning of our conversation. The way that
Yeah,
you can kind of get people to get on board with you is either with junk food or healthy food, right? And junk food would be to
yeah,
kind of blame someone else and villainize other people to kind of get people to
right,
rally around a common enemy, as opposed to striving for a common good. Where how do we get everyone to be happy, and how do we promise a better
yeah,
life for everyone, and I feel like you
absolutely,
can either run from a position of be afraid of everyone else and they're trying to get you, as opposed to what can we do to get everyone to be happy and successful and comfortable and just to
absolutely.
do well.
Yeah.
Interesting. So what's the war? So the mass execution happened, and what was
Mhm.
India's response?
India, this time it was a calibrated response. We didn't go all ham starting out, but I think the first significant decision we took was to cancel a water treaty that we have over the Indus River that runs through both of our countries, and say that we're no longer, going to uphold it. So the treaty essentially allowed for a division of the water's resources, but now we're like, we're not gonna hold on to it. We will
Right.
decide how much of that water we keep for ourselves. We may build dams on the upper riparians, which is the upper parts of the river, and you may not get the water you want. So we're like, all this is serious, because
So it was
as one.
initially it was initially an economic response, not a military
Yeah,
response.
it started with an economic response, and we, as one politician put it, blood and water cannot flow together. So I think there is a recognition in India. This is not the first time this is happening, by the way. This is, terrorist attacks like these, and in some senses even worse than these, have happened over series of decades. Even in Bombay, Bombay is perhaps the city that has suffered the most. And each time we have tried to be accommodating. We've tried various ways. We've tried to sanction Pakistan. We've tried to isolate them in the international community. We've tried to put them on grey lists in the financial world, but it has not borne the results we've wanted. And I think now there's a recognition that it has to be somewhat, like Israeli style. We need to show chutzpah and get,
Yeah.
show them that we will hit hard, and
Hmm.
in all senses. So the economic uh, penalties obviously were what we started out with, and then they progressed. And this Wednesday we launched ballistic missiles at what we uh, see as terror camps deep inside Pakistan. Um, we There were 9 sites that the army had singled out, and on Wednesday night we just blew them all up from within our airspace.
Wow.
So that that took them by surprise.
I bet.
As Yeah, there was suddenly all these videos of like kaboom, like, oh, we didn't see that coming, and I think we killed close to 150 terrorists, including the man. I don't know if you did you know about Daniel Pearl?
No, tell me about him.
So Daniel Pearl was a Jewish American journalist, a very famous one. I believe he worked for CNN, but I could be wrong. Who was investigating during the years of the war on terror and etc. He was investigating links in Pakistan's Punjab region, and it's over there that he gets kidnapped by Mullah Omar Sheikh and is forced to confess that he's a Jew on camera, and that he will not convert to Islam, and
Oh no,
etc. And that that he's has
an
ties to
infidel.
Israel,
Yeah,
and they behead him on camera.
they did
So
recently.
yeah, this was many years ago. It was, I think, at
Okay,
least 2 decades ago. But
okay.
it was a very brutal killing of a Jewish American journalist that shook the world. And one of the perpetrators of it was actually, um, you know, part of the terror matrix that we eliminated during Wednesday night strike. So
Wow.
there's a lot of interconnectedness here, like, because these terrorists, they don't only target India. They also look for Jewish targets. They also look for Israeli targets. Um,
Yeah.
they're also active in Afghanistan. So it's a whole apparatus, and I think the strikes that we did on Wednesday were our response to them.
Is there concern about nuclear escalation, or is that just Western media blowing things out of proportion?
There always is, because we're both nuclear armed countries. They have
I
about
would be scared
100.
shitless, Ray. Quite frankly.
It's never going to happen, Effie, because see, I'll tell you why. Very logically, this is what I tell people. See, when the US and the USSR sparred, you guys were separated by huge oceans and on different sides of the world. India and Pakistan share the same land. We share the same rivers, the same, sometimes, families,
So you
clans,
can't
all
blow
of
one
that.
up without blowing both up.
Yes, exactly. It is mutually assured destruction, and it's not as simple as So Pakistan has actually, it's quite devious that way. It has developed, and I think it is one of the only countries that has developed these something called tactical nuclear weapons. So tactical nuclear weapons are basically bonsai miniaturized nuclear warheads that they've developed specifically to use against Indian conventional forces. So because they know they cannot match the size and strength of the Indian military, tomorrow they're like, if shit hits the roof, they might launch a small baby nuke on our forces on the battlefield.
Right.
So but the thing is with
So
that.
that's more likely than like a full blown nuclear exchange,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah. So that's more likely. So these strategic nuclear warheads, as they call them, are more likely than the more conventional ones. But the point is that even if they use one of those, the fallout will be on regions that both of us share. We both share the same rivers. We both, like, when Chernobyl happened, which, funnily enough, I had the privilege of visiting before it got invaded. Um,
No way.
yeah, I was in
When?
Chernobyl December, Jan 2022, just before the war.
Wow. Yeah.
So when Chernobyl happened in the 1980s, there was a lot of concern in Western European capitals about nuclear fallout, like the winds
Yeah.
taking the ashes to Paris and Amsterdam and Warsaw. So what the Ukrainians did was they dug up 6 feet of the topsoil wherever in the fallout zone, and they put them in lead containers to contain the radiation.
Yes,
So
that's
that's
right.
that. So that's to give you an idea about how it's there may be a nuclear fallout in one part, but the effects of it, if especially if you share a contiguous landmass, will be felt by you sooner or later. So in our case, because we're like neighbors that share so much, um, you can't bomb one side without feeling the effects on yours as well. And this is just the effects. Of course, India has a policy of no first use, so we will never be the first ones to use nukes. But should we ever get the indication that you're going to use one on us, we have a policy of total annihilation. So we launch all of them. You will be wiped out.
Really?
Um,
Even though
yes.
it might
So
affect India in the long term?
even though if so it's called, there's a fancier word in international relations that's escaping my mind right now. It's just 2 a.m. But it's called like total annihilation or something like that. So it's not like we will respond in a measured way to a nuclear attack. If there's even a tactical nuclear warhead launched at us, a small one, we
Right.
release all of them. We let the gates of hell
Yeah.
open. There's no coming back.
Yeah. War scares the crap out of me these days, man. I mean,
Yeah.
about a year ago, actually, did I tell you I had a second kid?
Sorry.
Did I tell you that I had a second kid the other week?
No, I know the first one. I didn't know you
Oh
had a second
yes, I had
kid.
a baby girl. I had a baby girl,
Oh
right?
my god,
But
congratulations.
thank
What's her name?
you. Her name's Ariella. And
Beautiful.
she looks like an alien still, so we have to give her like another couple of
They all
weeks.
do. They all
But
do.
she's so cute. But yeah, it's really exciting. I'll send you some pictures after. But I was going last year. I was
Hmm.
going. I remember when I ran when it really looked like we're on the cusp of World War III, right?
Yeah.
Between and I was going for a jog one time, one night when I heard the news, and I was just while I was jogging, thinking like how much it would suck that
Yeah.
if Florida got bombed, right? And
Right.
I mean, killing myself to support a family and raise them and live my life and be productive and do the right things, like I lose everything because of a decision
Yeah.
that because of a decision a political leader made, that translated into destroying my life. I was like, I
Yeah.
just can't, I can't, like, just that notion itself made it hard to stomach any kind of notion of war, and I mean, it
Yeah.
really scares the heck out of me, and it really makes me. I think I have a different kind of appreciation. Like, I don't think that you have like you could still take sides and say that war
Yeah.
shouldn't war sucks and shouldn't happen, like you could still say
Yeah.
that you have like a moral alignment with one side or
Hmm.
another. That doesn't necessarily mean that it has to escalate to people minding their own business getting blown up, and that's
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
I've been feeling that really strongly, and so when I heard about this happening in India,
Yeah.
just last week, I felt very strongly, just like, oh man, like like it's so heartbreaking, and like to hear that more of
Yeah.
it's happening is just it's so upsetting, it's so sad, it's so sad.
We're used to it at this point, and I
That's even
think
worse, right?
yeah, in some ways, getting numb to war is so like when you think about terror attacks, like I mean, in the recent past they have come down. Like, and to Modi's credit, he has been pretty good at ramping up internal security, these lapses notwithstanding. But they're a feature of our lives here. Like, for instance, when I have to use our version of the subway, it's not subway, it's elevated here. I have to go through a metal detector, and I have to go through a man frisking me on a pedestal with a
Really?
wand. Yes. So and
But
oh
would you prefer that to not having that security on a big public thing? Like would you rather that?
yeah, because I know that I'm more secure. I'm that there's
Like
that
I think the
and
subways need security. Like I've been saying for years. I think it's crazy that anyone could just walk down a subway, put
yeah,
$2 in, and just go anywhere they want to, and be with the
right.
entire world. Like it's scary.
But like the kind of security that we have for our a lot of our public transport, our malls, our cinemas, they're akin to what you would see at an airport. So we have to put our things in a tray, and the tray goes through a scanner. Then I go through a metal detector, and as soon as I emerge from the other side of the metal detector, there's a man or a woman standing with a wand that will pat me down. This happens every time we enter cinema halls, malls, shopping complexes, big events, stadiums, and of course public transport as well. So this is the
Wow.
reality of our life here, and sure, it does take us a few extra 10 seconds. It adds an extra level of complexity and fuss to our lives, but I know that it is for our security, and we live in a very
Yeah.
volatile part of the world. So I'd rather spend those extra 10 seconds um, than getting blown up,
Yeah, yeah,
somewhere.
definitely.
So
Oh man. Oh man. Okay, I want to ask you one last question. I feel terrible. I feel bad that it's 2 o'clock in the morning.
no,
Um,
don't be. I've been awake for the last few nights because of all of this, and I mean, not out of stress, but I love collecting OS int, which is like open source intelligence, and
how
kind
do you
of keeping
collect it?
track
Where do
of.
you get it from?
So there's an app that I use, very rudimentary, called Flight Radar 24, which shows you all the flights in the world on live, like on the map. You can tell their
Cool.
call sign, all of that. So that's one way. There's certain Reddit forums, defense forums. So I lurk everywhere and try to like figure out the narratives before they hit the mainstream media. So that's like, it's a little quirk that I have, but
That's
so
awesome.
I
Good for you.
don't feel bad.
Does is the mainstream media m- more trusted in India than it is in America? Because right now, no one trusts mainstream media. So like everyone has to get their sources from like
Yeah.
literally anywhere. It's so crazy.
I don't think it's reached the American level, but there are moments. And also, there's something to be said about how it depends on who you ask, right? Like, because a lot of the media houses in the past few years, especially during Modi's second term, they kind of got compromised in that they switched tacks and are completely pro government at this point, and are very reluctant to criticize any of the policies that come from the center. So I think there's, if you speak to people who voted for that party, they'll be like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong. This is
Well,
great. We
yeah,
love it."
sure.
But then, yeah. So it's
I
similar.
gotcha. Yeah, I gotcha. What? So I saw you. I saw one of your stories. I wanted to ask you about it.
Uh huh.
Um, about Trump being involved in the ceasefire, and that you
Right.
didn't seem thrilled with that, right?
Absolutely not. And
Okay,
it just
I would love to hear.
comes,
I would
yeah.
love to hear your thoughts on that and why.
It just comes down to our experiences with colonialism, right? Like we've been lauded over by a third party, a country that had no business being in our land, in our involved in our affairs. So that kind of experience really informs your policies going forward as an independent country. So it has been a matter of Indian state policy since the birth of this country to be non-aligned, and to chart its own path, and to not be in any block. And this is sometimes to our own detriment, right? Because if you're not, a lot of our allies are not as vocal about supporting us, because we're not as vocal about supporting them. We try to maintain equanimity. So
Right.
the point of all this is that we generally like being independent in how we deal with things. And it has also been a matter of state policy for India to keep Kashmir a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan. Effie, I'll be very honest with you. If yesterday we heard that Pakistan had wanted to do a ceasefire with us, and it had come from the two of us, that's India and Pakistan, I would be a little disappointed because we couldn't whoop their ass more, but I take it. I take it. But we do not like um, Western countries meddling in our affairs, and certainly not people preempting it and stealing credit for it. And I think there's also a certain dismissiveness in this current administration and the way it treats this conflict. Like, oh, these are just two children, get over it. This is not serious. Because you think about it, if 26 people were massacred in Aspen in a ski resort, okay, one fine spring morning, how
The
would
world would
America
flip out.
reacted? Yeah,
Yeah.
like America, got enlisted so many Western countries that had nothing to do with 9/11 in its war on terror, and we'll not get into the weeds of it, but when it happens to one of you guys, everybody's supposed to stand up and take note, and it's a big deal. But when it's with us, then it's treated with short shrift and a certain dismissiveness that I've noticed in the tone and tenor of American statements.
Well, I would like to
So I
change
think,
that, quite frankly. I mean, that's why I think it's important to even learn about this from you and put this out because I think that I think it is relevant. I think it is important. Like again, even if
mhm,
India and Pakistan keep it between the two of you guys,
yeah,
the world should still be aware and should still be aware as to
absolutely.
the value and the history and what's going
The
on here.
complexities, yeah,
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 the complexities
100%.
for sure, for sure, for sure.
It's
Are there parts of Kashmir that are almost like religious grounds similar to the Middle East, or is it just based on like where you're going to be, and again that conflict between the leadership and the population?
It's yeah, no, it's not religious. Like I don't think there's any part of it's not like the Al-Aqsa Mosque or
Gotcha.
the Dome of the Rock.
Right.
There's no religious significance to the land as such. It's more of a like an ethno conflict, a made up ethno conflict at this point because the Kashmiris are fine. Like there are questions of devolving more autonomy to the local government and all of that, which India does with certain states which lie on its periphery, but there is no burning demand for secession or anything of that sort. It's
So
most of that,
interesting.
yeah. So it's more to do with the land, but Kashmir is
So
also
how does it
yeah.
so would this hypothetically be easier to resolve if there was a little bit less invested? Like, what would it take to resolve this, or what does it take?
Oh, that is a great question, and I wish
We
I
don't we
knew.
don't we would have all night if we to answer that question, right? That's what
But
we need.
I'll just add one more dimension to it, and we're Jews and Hindus. We ask more questions than we answer them, right? So I will put one more thing to complicate your brain more. Kashmir is not just about the land, but it's also the resources because it's where the glaciers that feed most of the waters that irrigate the Indian subcontinent lie. So
Oh boy.
the
So it's very
yeah,
valuable land.
it is very valuable. So even right now, when I mentioned that economic reaction that we took of suspending the water treaty, it's connected to that because we happen to be in the higher elevations, the upper reaches. So we have control over the flow of water before it enters Pakistan. So in some ways, this is also a water war, a war of resources, which is only going to heat up with climate change and global warming. So
Right.
that's another dimension to it as well, besides all the land, ethno conflict, blah blah blah. So it's hard to
Well,
see
I feel
what it
like that
would
would
take.
be, but I feel like that would be the underlying thing to solve, right? Like if you, I mean, I think money speaks louder than almost anything. I think I
Yeah.
think people have I think we've come to learn that throughout the years. Um, but I think that you think it just comes. You think that money or like a fair deal, would just kind of make the whole thing go away.
No, no. This is like I think in these parts, Effie, like in the old world as we call it, like you guys live in the new world.
Yeah,
People have ties to the land, right? Like it's like when you talk about Israel as well, there's people that have been living there for years, decades, centuries, maybe. Here
yeah,
as well, there's people. So there's no amount of money. There's only so much money can buy. There's
right,
questions of identity mixed into it. There's questions of
yeah,
nationhood mixed into it
yeah.
that money simply cannot solve.
Well, you could try. I don't know. I mean,
We
I don't
may,
know.
we may. Let's
It
see.
Because if not, the answer is just to keep on doing this. For who knows
There's,
how
I mean,
long.
there are answers, but it's also we may do everything that see it has died down. Like if you saw a graph of the insurgency or the number of militant attacks in Kashmir, it has come down over the years to the credit of not just this government but previous ones as well. There have been
Yeah,
concerted efforts in that direction. But like I said, right, the Pakistan army needs a it needs to justify its existence. It needs to justify
yeah, I
um,
understand. Right.
it
So you got,
so
yeah,
so
yeah. It's
so
very
we may do
complicated.
everything right, right? Like we may do everything right. The population seems to be enjoying the fruits of India's phenomenal economic growth. We were just about to see a fantastic tourist season, but then now you have these external actors that have all these intentions against you. So what do you do about that, right? Like, do we balkanize Pakistan further? Do we hit them until they um, do a regime change? We don't know. We want a lot of things. You ask a lot
Yeah,
of us Indians, we want a very firm response this time. But yeah, it's going to take two to tango, as they say.
yeah, yeah. It does. It definitely does. I think I will leave you with that. I think I'll let you go to sleep. By the way, I've never. Why is there a half hour time difference? It's like it was, what is it, eight and a half
We had to
hours?
be
And
different. We had to be different, right? We were
I
like,
guess
no,
so.
we
It's
we
cool. I never
we
heard of
will
it
not be
before.
same.
Shrey, I love talking to you, man. I missed you.
I love
Um,
talking to you, and we need to catch up more casually at some point.
yes,
Like
Yes,
where
yes,
we're not
yes.
talking about the end of the war. We need to be talking about your kids and your wife
And I
and
want,
your
yes, that's right.
and Disney.
Of course, of course, of course, of course. Shrey, I love you. Thank you so much for doing this.
Love you, Ashish.
We'll talk soon,
Goodbye.
and we'll do this again. I hope. Okay.
Absolutely. Bye
All
bye.
right.
Good
Bye,
night.
everyone. Good night.